everyone. Chuck Morse here. Welcome to the program. We're live Monday through Friday, 12 noon to 1 o'clock. And you are welcome to join the conversation by calling the following number, 617-396-4830. That number again, is 617-396-4830 to join the live program here at the Morse Force with yours truly, Chuck Morse. First of all, I want to wish all of my viewers and followers a very Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you and yours. Peace on earth, goodwill to men. I love Christmas. I am Jewish, and I'm speaking here as an American that I love Christmas because Christmas, we should note, is a formal American holiday, as well it should be. Christmas was an executive order was signed in 1870 by President Ulysses S. Grant, recognizing Christmas as a national holiday, and I am proud and pleased to celebrate Christmas and to say Merry Christmas. I also would even add to that I believe that the celebration of Jesus' birth is an American thing. This is not theological for me, of course, and I'm putting aside the theological aspect to it, which I have an enormous amount of respect for. But the fact of the matter is, even coming from a secular standpoint, that had it not been for the ministry of Jesus, there would be no America today. There would be no American Republic because Jesus was able to expand on and advance the moral and ethical precepts of Mount Sinai, the Torah, given by God through Moses. And that Torah is what is the basis of American law and jurisprudence and our civilization, our Western civilization. I know that recently I've been interviewing E. Michael Jones, and he says that only through Jesus can you get Logos. I would differ with that and point out that Logos was given to man at the time of Sinai. God gave Logos to all of mankind through the Torah. The Torah outlines all of the moral and ethical precepts upon which we live and we base our civilization. The Torah has everything in it. I would even say that Logos was there at the time of Abraham and certainly at the time of King David. And Jesus, of course, had Logos in spades. I mean, there's no question about that. Probably the most important man to ever live. But I honor, as an American Jew, I honor Christmas because I believe that through the ministry of Jesus, the Torah precepts, again, were developed, and all of the moral and ethical ideas that have created our civilization were accepted by the world through his ministry, which is why Jesus' ministry is the linchpin of history, and which is why I do believe in the concept of a dual covenant. The Davidic covenant, the Mosaic covenant is forever, but the covenant of Jesus was basically one by which the entire world was grafted in, which is why Jesus really, in a sense, was the Messiah in many ways. I mean, I'm not Christian, but I recognize the importance that he played in the same way that, it was certainly a messianic event. I'll go that far. Now, I also want to talk about, and also just to finish up on the Christmas piece, there is a great sense of brotherhood and family and all of the values that the Torah represents, that Judaism represents, that Christianity represents, are wrapped up in that day. And speaking of, as a New Englander, as a Bostoner, I enjoy Christmas. I like the festivity of it, the lights and the colors and the green and the red. And, it's a dreary time of the year weather-wise here. Things get very cold and very gray. And it's a nice thing to see some Christmas celebration. And I enjoy that. I like Christmas. I like eggnog. And also, not that I need eggnog. I think anyone looking at me knows that. But putting that aside. And I enjoy, to a certain extent, the commercialism of Christmas. I like the gift giving. I like the stores opening up and toys for children and people exchanging gifts. I think that's a good thing. So, Merry Christmas to all. Merry Christmas. I want to talk a little bit about maybe a little bit more of a sobering subject, and that is the Federal Reserve Bank, the Federal Reserve System. President Trump is criticizing the Federal Reserve for considering a raise in interest rates because right now the inflation is relatively low, the dollar is relatively sound, and he's questioning why would the Fed at this time raise interest rates and contract the dollar at a time when there's a lot of innovation, a lot of investment. Now, look, I'm not against the existence of a Federal Reserve. I think that it could be conducted in a way that's certainly more under the auspices of the people of the United States and our Congress. And I think that it's really up to Congress and the President, ultimately, the Treasury, to determine interest rates. Because the Fed is essentially a consortium of private bankers. Now look, as a capitalist, you'd say, well, why don't I support private ownership? I do. But there are certain areas in life that do require government involvement because they affect everybody. And capitalism, by the way, the whole idea of a unfettered capitalism, complete free market, world free trade, those are ideas that are as dangerous, as false, even as revolutionary, frankly, as is communism. Because capitalism is, while it's something that exists in nature, it is part of who we are as human beings. The idea of creating and inventing and imagining on our own as living beings, as created in the image of God. That these ideas and the right to exchange our ideas and make them available to the public and engage in exchanges of goods and services in order to improve our lives and store wealth, these things are normal to the human being, but at the same time, traditionally, they have been constrained both by governments, which are set up to serve the people that live there, and by the moral and ethical precepts of the Torah. The Torah has enormous numbers of laws and precepts that deal with proper financial interaction, proper business relations, proper personal relations. And that capitalism, in order to really function in a way that is optimal for the individual and for society, needs to operate within the constraints of morality and within the constraints of sovereign governments and protecting their specific interests as laid out, in our case, by a constitution. So, we could get into a history of how it is that capitalism became unhinged from morality and who did that. I have my theories on it, but I'm going to save that for another day. My point here with regard to the Federal Reserve is that the creation of currency should be done by governments. Now, people may disagree with me on this because they're saying, well, how can we trust the government? How can we trust the government to do anything? We have a limited government, a representative government. We live in a republic. And we give very limited proscribed powers to government, and that those powers are balanced by a division of powers, what's called the system of checks and balances, something that exists both in government and in life. And in that context, it really should be Congress that controls interest rates, not the Federal Reserve, because Congress represents the people, and the currency, the dollar, represents the good faith and credit of the people, the United States, not some international banking establishment or even domestic banking establishment. International and domestic bankers and investors and business people and you and I, mom and pop, business people, we have a right to expect that our dollar maintains a value that reflects what our economy and what our society is producing to the highest degree possible. It's not a perfect science, but it shouldn't be an instrument where people make money from the creation or contraction of the dollar itself. The dollar itself should be a neutral instrument. It should be and it doesn't necessarily have to be backed by gold either. I'm not a big absolute advocate of the gold standard. However, gold has been traditionally, and silver and other metals, have been over thousands of years the means of exchange. I mean, it's internationally recognized. It has static value. Abraham used silver coins to buy the funeral plot for his family and himself at the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. I mean, it goes back to the ancient times. In fact, that exchange, which was one of the world's first real estate exchanges, took place in public with all the witnesses of the people, both of Abraham and of the tribe of the Hittites who sold him that cave. There was an exchange, there was a banquet, there was an agreed on price. There was a whole series of ceremonies that went into that exchange so that everyone on all sides knew and understood that it had taken place and that this the plot of land was received by Abraham and that the Hittites received the price that they asked for, which was a very high price. Abraham gave that to them in the form of silver coins, and that's how a transaction should happen. It's out in the open. It is an exchange of an abstract value, which is coin, for a concrete value, which was a piece of land, a cave in this case. That's a proper exchange, and silver played a role in it. So I mention that because gold and silver and coin do play a role. They are issued without interest. The coins in your pocket, pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, half dollars, dollars, they were issued by the U.S. Treasury directly, interest-free. They are simply issued because, traditionally in the 19th century, people could show up to the U.S. Mint in Washington with silver and have it minted into coins. But ultimately, I don't think a currency needs to be based upon metal, because metal itself is a commodity. It can be manipulated by people who can control the quantity of it, and it has its own value, and money should not really be a commodity. Money is an abstract value. Money can be, and it is proven to work as simply a piece of paper with a proper quality to it, a proper stamp on it of the government, and hopefully some artwork and some tradition and some representation of that nation, and that the government then issues that money into the economy based upon what the economy is producing. By that means, you have a dollar that serves a static value that could be saved by the earner. It could be used as an exchange between goods and services in a way that the earner and the recipient understand that its value is going to be stable. It's not going to fluctuate too much. They can trust it because it's based on the goodwill and the interest of a moral society that created the currency and did so in a way that reflects the need of that particular society, and nothing more, nothing less. So currency really can and ought to be created directly by the government. It ought to be created by Congress, who can have a committee to decide this. That could be the Federal Reserve. That we could turn that into that. and that basically they then go to the U.S. Treasury, and the Treasury issues the currency to pay for public services or to give to bank members to then use to loan to businesses who come up with a sustainable plan. And thus, money is then spent into the economy in a way that reflects the production of that economy. Now, the idea of doing this, by the way, just to get into a little history, began here in my own home state of Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Massachusetts has been the beginning of a lot of things in this continent, and money is one of them, because the colonial governor of Massachusetts at that time, I don't exactly know who it was, I think it might have been Winstead, he authorized the creation of a land bank. And the land bank was basically owned by the colony. It issued scrip, they called it scrip back then, to landowners, farmers, and eventually to small businessmen, industrialists. Back then, industry was like a mill or creating a small ironworks, and there were other like local small industries. The land bank would issue them loans at a very low interest rate, and thus the scrip would be spent into the economy in a form that reflected value. It was leveraged into the economy based upon conservative principles. I mean, it was like, they'd look at a farm and decide, is this farm going to be a going concern? Do they have a plan? Are the people of good character who are asking for the loan? In a way, the way banks work today, except, maybe it's not quite as vigorous in certain ways. And then the money would be spent into the economy, and the interest rate, which was very low, the monies that would be taken in by the bank would be used by the colony in the form of, instead of taxing. I mean, they would use it to do things like improve infrastructure, build roads, put up, in the case of Boston, they created a system of street lamps to illuminate the city at night, or charities to give to the poor, or to give to, people, widows of or someone who lost their spouse, or who would, was having trouble making ends meet. They could get welfare at a local level administered by the state, and the money would be taken out of the interest earned on these loans, so there was no taxes. And the result is that the colony boomed. It had an enormous development, and that the system was copied by all of the other colonies, or most of the other colonies, who also used various means. Like, for example, if you go to the state capital in Maryland, in Annapolis, I actually was there once, and I was visiting. On the grounds of the state capitol is a counting house for tobacco, still there from colonial times. And what would happen would be that tobacco, which was the main crop of the Maryland colony, the tobacco growers would bring tobacco into this counting house and exchange it for money, for scrip. And the scrip would thus be spent into the economy. The tobacco would be sold by the colony at a profit, and the colony would use the profit to pay for its own government and its own development of infrastructure. There were no taxes. The same thing happened in I believe all of the colonies developed scrip, various levels. I'm getting into a little of the history of money here, and I wrote a book on the topic, by the way, called The Art and Science of American Money. Then Benjamin Franklin, the great American, diplomat and citizen, he went to England, I think it was in 1850s, or 1750s, excuse me. And the Parliament asked him, he said, how can it be that the American colonies are so prosperous? What are they doing that is creating this? And Franklin told them, it's because they have their own money. They've created their own currencies. Well, the Parliament decided after hearing this that they wanted to stop that. They wanted to control the currency. So they passed a fiat law, a currency act, which banned the colonists from having scrip, that the colonists could only engage in exchange with Spanish coins, which were very rare, and with Bank of England notes. The Bank of England had become predominant in England with the arrival of the Orange dynasty of William and Mary in the 1780s, I think. Well, it could have been the 1780s, but it's been the 1680s. And they implemented a Bank of England monopoly on the colonies. So the colonies were banned from using scrip. They could only use Bank of England notes. And the result was that the American colonies were thrown into a depression. That was the first time in the Western Hemisphere that any society had experienced such a thing, because the colonists had lost control of their own money. Their money no longer reflected the value of their own economy and their own society. Instead, it was being manipulated by this private bank overseas, the Bank of England. And many people have suggested that that was a major cause of the beginning of the American Revolution. The colonists wanted their money back. They wanted control of their currency. And one of the first things that the Second Continental Congress did in 1776 was they issued a law establishing a national scrip, what was called the Continental Scrip. And that they used this money to reflect the economy of the 13 colonies, to pay for the outfitting and establishment of the Continental Army of George Washington, of whom George Washington was appointed to head the army. The problem, of course, was that during the war, the British shipped in counterfeits by the bucket load, and they began spending them into the economy, which devalued the value of the scrip. That's why you got the term, "that's not worth a continental dam," because the scrip became almost worthless. It was like it was worth paper. And it was devalued because of the increase. Thus, the colonists again lost control of their currency in the course of a war. So, look, I could go into the history further. It's a fascinating history. As I mentioned, I wrote a book on the topic called The Art and Science of American Money. And this is not against the idea of a central bank. I simply would point out that that central bank needs to be majority owned by the American people, not by private bankers. There could be some investment. There could be some credit. But most of it, probably at least 75% of it, should be owned by the U.S. government, and that the money should be directly issued into the currency, into the economy, by acts of Congress through a very careful subscription of a committee of economists who understand and who are able to analyze how much the economy needs in order to preserve and maintain a steady and constant value of the dollar, and that value can go up or down depending upon means to determine production. The U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, or Clause 4, I'm not sure, actually states in plain language that Congress shall coin money, shall coin money and regulate the value thereof. Now, what is meant by that? It's not necessarily literally coins that it's talking about. It's talking about, although there is that, and there still is that, it's talking about coining money is creating money. Congress creates money, and by doing so, they regulate the value of money. So if they create too much money, the value goes down and inflation goes up. If they don't create enough money, then the value goes up, but you have depression because there's not enough money to fulfill the ability of the American citizen to engage in trade in goods and services, to save currency. Now, let me just finish by pointing out that there's a very obscure monetarist and economic theorist of the 19th century who served, I believe, under President Andrew Johnson as as a secretary of the mint, or he had some high position. His name was Alexander Delmar, and he wrote a book called The Science of Money. And he defines money as having three qualities. The first is that money is an abstract means of storage. In other words, money is not like literally storing bricks of gold in your basement. Money is an abstract means of storing such value. So due to your labor or due to your inheritance or due to however it comes about, if you have money, which is an abstract value, you store that value by holding on to money. The more money you hold on, the more storage you have. That's a natural aspect of human life. We store things so that we can be independent, so we can be prepared for the future, both in the negative sense for survival and in the positive sense for growth, for building our life, for furthering developing our life. So we're natural storers. We all store stuff. Everyone does. It's part of being alive. And so money provides an abstract means of storage. The second quality of money is that it's a means of exchange. In other words, we can't have a complete barter economy where, if I'm a farmer and I have, milk, I expect to, from cows, I can't expect to go out and buy lunch by giving someone a bottle of milk. They may not need milk. You have to have an abstract means of exchange, so that if I am a farmer and I create milk, I then sell that milk to people. They give me a dollar or $10 or $100, whatever the price may be, and that price is determined by the free market, what Adam Smith accurately called the hidden hand of the market, and that I'm able to then give the person the milk in exchange for the dollars. And so I'm storing value, and I can then use that value to exchange with a restaurant so I can go have lunch. And they get the dollars and I get the lunch. Then they take that dollar and they exchange it for whatever they're doing. They have they need to buy new clothes or whatever it is. And thus you have money as a means of storing value, and as a means of exchange. Without money, you can't have exchange. Every society has had to have money. Even the most primitive of societies had forms of money, whether it be, seashells or shiny rocks. The British experimented with this idea of a tally stick during the Middle Ages, where they would notch holes in the side of a stick, and then they put two sticks together to then retire the money. And they were just, means of exchange go way back. I mean, the American Express traveler's check is a form of money. During the war and World War II, cigarettes were a form of money because they were rare, and people would exchange cigarettes for other goods. I suppose that's a form of barter, but it's also anything that's recognized as of value between two parties in the abstract sense can be considered money. But a nation creates a currency based on the general value of that nation and its economic and spiritual needs, and that money is then used as a means of exchange. And then, of course, the third value that Alexander Delmar talked about was money is a measurement of time. In other words, your labor can be valued in the form of money. So if you're earning, $15 an hour, and you work 5 hours, then you earn as much money as that is. It's $75. My math isn't the greatest. But the point is that you're measuring the time you're spending on something. When you work on a project, I'm writing a book right now. I try to think, how much time am I putting into this, and how much do I expect to be paid for the effort? I mean, it's a means of measuring time. So those are the three values, abstract values of money, and that they express the value in an abstract sense in the same way that we abstractly believe in things. I mean, we believe in a creator of the universe. We believe in all sorts of values that are abstract and that are not necessarily commodities, which again is why I don't think a currency needs to be based on a commodity, whether it be gold or silver or anything else. even though commodities play a role, they should play a role. Gold and silver should play a role. Barter should play a role. Countries still do barter. We do barter all the time. It's part of it. It probably makes up maybe 5 to 6% of exchanges are by barter. You know, you bring something and you trade it in for something else. It's like trading baseball cards. That's barter. Anyway, so getting back to the original idea here, it troubles me and it's scary to me that this unelected body of investors, domestic and international, get to decide interest rates on our money. It is our money. We are the sovereign people of the United States, and we ought to demand that our government control our money, and our representatives who we elect decide the value of that money based upon our interests, so that the money can be steady and it can be preserved, and that people, private sector bankers and investors, don't profit from the money itself. They profit from what they're doing. They profit from their industry. They profit from their, legitimate banking when they loan money out at interest, and then they get the interest as their payment. Not from the creation of the money itself. That should be neutral. It should be interest-free. The Federal Reserve charges interest when they give money, loans to our government. What a way to reduce the federal deficit by, basically having the government live within its means and only issue the currency that it can justify as a legitimate expense that is backed by some kind of a tangible event, whether it be, like a business that has a plan, whether it be property, whatever, and thus issue currency in the same way that the Massachusetts Land Bank issued currency very successfully in colonial times. Anyway, on that note, I want to thank you for watching this afternoon. This is Chuck Morse, host of the Morse Force. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It'll help me monetize the show. Maybe I'll get some currency from this because I need to reach, 1,000 subscribers. Right now I'm at about 500, and last I checked I'm at 555, so I'm getting there. And once I reach that level, I'll be able to share in ad revenue with YouTube, and I'll be able to put up ads for my books and all that good stuff. So please subscribe. It's free. All you need to do is click the subscribe button. If you decide you don't want to subscribe, you can unclick it. But you'll get this show delivered to your email box, your YouTube box, every time I do it, and you'll get extra bonus programs as well. And check out my books. They're available at Amazon.com. Just put my name in the server, Chuck Morse, Morse, like Morse code, and you'll see about 15 books come up. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Merry Christmas, and have a great afternoon.